Good afternoon, brothers and sisters. It's a delight to be with you. I appreciate the opportunity to speak for a few minutes. I apologize in advance for the subject. It's an assessment of the Mideast. Some of you have been there probably more recently than I have. My last trip, I got home about 3 weeks ago. I was in northern Iraq or Kurdistan, Morocco, Qatar, the UAE, and Oman. And I've had, since I've been here, about 4 short tours over there. And it's remarkable to see the change in just the year that I've been here in this assignment. So I'll walk you through this. I'd be glad to respond to any questions you have, either during the presentation or at the end. First, it's a pretty important area. It's big, a lot of square miles, a lot of nothing on top of the soil, but a lot of stuff underneath the soil. And when we say 2/3 of the oil reserves in the world, that's a serious thing. If you think of the president remarked today, speaking of the economy and the shutdown of the government and the possible default, and he said, in my tenure as president, this year we will be the #1 oil producer in the world. And that's interesting, but it's not really important. Our proven reserves are about 26 billion barrels. The Saudis alone, 267 billion barrels. So yeah, we might be pumping it out of the ground fast, but there's just not that much to pump here in the United States. So we're going to depend on this area for energy for a long time. And if you go to northern Iraq, you'll find that they have about 45 billion of proven reserve just in northern Iraq and Kurdistan, and they've just hit another, what they think is a gold mine. And I say that in terms of oil. There are some who estimate that it'll be nearly as big as the Saudi reserves. Now, I don't know if that's true or not, and it hasn't been proven, but there's a great deal of exploration going on over there by the UK, and the Dutch, the Germans, and even the Russians. A lot of the oil goes to the east, huge population growth. Muslims populate the earth a lot faster than we do, and the problem is that every girl that's born doesn't really count because she doesn't add to the productivity of the nation because of the way they subordinate women over there. Just briefly about the peace process, Israel is in tough shape right now. They're pretty much alone. They're surrounded by Sunni radicals, and if something goes bad in Egypt, and it looked like it appears that it is right now, the rebels have used RPGs, automatic weapons, and a number of other very powerful IEDs that mean they are beginning to get armed, and so that could be very bad for the rest of Israel, or Israel and the rest of Egypt as well. Hezbollah, as you know, in the north, in Lebanon, the southern part of Lebanon, has been shipping rockets from Syria, which in turn came from Iran. And some of those are very long range. They'll be able to hit Tel Aviv, Jerusalem, any place they want in Israel, should the call come from Iran to go to war. Hamas down in the south, in the Gaza Strip, very emboldened by the 8-day war, which was here a few months ago. No victor was called, but they clearly stood up to the Israelis. And in fact, so much so that the Qatar Prime Minister came and visited them, the first real dignitary that's visited the Gaza Strip in a decade, and gave them $450 million. So they now are thinking they are a force to be reckoned with in the south. And will there be peace in Egypt? It certainly doesn't look like it. If you follow it every day now, there are more and more killings. Just over the weekend, there were about a dozen, and a number of very sequential and orchestrated attacks, both in the Sinai as well as in Cairo itself. Syrian civil war, that's a subject that we could spend hours on. It's just a real mess. And the rebels are fighting one another now. There are calls for truce between the rebel groups. We're trying to destroy chemical weapons in the midst of this. There'll be 100 UN experts there starting tomorrow. And that's actually getting done. The equipment that builds the weapons is being destroyed. And that's essentially bulldozing over stuff. And the easy stuff is getting done, but they have 1,000 tons of it. And so That's a lot of stuff to try to destroy and try to find and gather together while people are shooting at you. Fault lines of conflict. Of course, there's the Israeli-Palestine line that could go any minute. Right now they're in 6 or 7 sessions of guaranteed talks. They have to do. They signed an agreement with Secretary Kerry of the United States to do that, and so the Palestinians and the Israelis are talking. But my understanding of the meetings is they go in, sit down, shake each other's hand, and then stare at each other for about 3 or 4 hours, and then get up and walk out. So I'm not sure how constructive that kind of talk it really is. Arab and Israeli, that could happen, another war. Arab and Persian, that's something maybe we'll talk about a little at the end. We'll try to figure that out. Israel, Iran, you know that Netanyahu just came to the UN and said, we will not allow Iran to get nuclear weapons. And if we have to stand alone to do that, we will. So know that this new guy that they elected over there in Iran is essentially a talking head. He doesn't run things. He doesn't have any foreign policy portfolio. The guy that runs things is the Khamenei, and he's surrounded by about 20 religious radicals, and they make all the decisions in that country. And so even though he may talk like he wants to make peace and get rid of nuclear weapons, I don't think it's going to happen. Populations in their dictatorial governments, you've seen what's happened over the past 2.5 years with the Arab Spring that really wasn't. And then finally, Sunni Shiite is a fascinating development that's taking place as the whole Mideast sort of polarizes into Sunnis in the south, Shiites in the north. And you have to ask yourself, what are the geopolitical ramifications of something like that? They don't like each other. They've hated each other for 1,000 years, 1,500 years, and so there's a good chance that they might go after one another. So it's really complex and difficult to comprehend. First, Iraq, corruption's at an all-time high. Shiite government, it was a Sunni government under Saddam Hussein for 40 years. So it's get even time, and that's exactly what they're doing. That's caused the Sunnis to rebel. They're the ones that are killing people at a rate of about 800 to 1,000 a month. It's almost at the rate that it was during their civil war in 2007 and 8. So you could almost say that Iraq's in the middle of another civil war. There's continuous violence. The further security gains by the U.S. are just simply out of the question. There are probably less than 100 uniformed men there, and most of the people that are there are State Department or contractors. And so the U.S. military engagement is just not there, so it's not going to happen. The Kurds in the north, they've effectively split from the rest of the country. They have their own independent region, and if you talk to them, you don't dare say they're in Iraq. They want American money, not Iraqi money when you pay your bill. So they're very, very independent. They have been brutally attacked by Saddam Hussein as well as the Turks and the Iranians. So the Kurds have finally believed they have a homeland, and I think they're going to exploit it and take it to the extreme if they have to. And of course, the Shiite fighters from Iraq continue to go over to Iran or over to Syria to fight against the Sunni rebels that are taking place. They're taking part in their civil war. I just say here they're committed to a nuclear weapons program, and I think that's absolutely right. The mixed signals, I only say that because of this new guy that is coming out talking like everything's going to be just fine and we're going to go to the negotiating table. It's not going to happen. Remember, he was their previous nuclear negotiator in 2000, and nothing changed, so I don't think anything's going to now. We're all focused on Syria and Egypt, and our economies are weak, and we're approaching another fiscal disaster here in this country. So we're really giving lip service to what's happening over there. Khamenei's making the decisions, I already told you that. Rouhani, this new guy, is popular with the West, but he doesn't really play a role. The military, they exercise continually with fast boats and other naval forces, as well as silkworm rockets that shoot from shore out to sea. If they hit one liquid petrol or liquid gas tanker, close the straits for about 2 weeks. So it wouldn't take much to start a real difficult situation over there. Their rocket technology as well as their nuclear technology continues to improve. Syria, I hesitate to say much about Syria because it's such a terrible mess. It's devastating the infrastructure. There are about 2.5 million people that are refugees. Those are people that are out of the country. There's another probably 2.5 million. So we're talking about 20 or 25% of the population has been displaced, some of them inside the country. That graphic that we have up here in the upper right corner, that's a camp that it's called Zatari. It's up on the northern border between Jordan and Syria. I was up there about 6 months ago, and at that time, it's a camp that was built to handle about 8,500. At that time, it was handling 60 or 70,000. There's now 130,000 people in this camp. We don't let any of our humanitarian specialists go into the camp anymore because it's just simply too dangerous. You can't even drive in there with a vehicle. It's a lot of tough hombres have come over, and essentially they come over and get fed, and then they go back over into Syria and fight. The opposition fighters, up until about 2 months ago, whoops, I'm sorry, I apologize, back one here. Up until about 2 months ago, everybody said that the number of jihadists or the number of radicals or Al-Qaeda type people that were fighting in the rebels was probably somewhere around 14% to 15%. Now, a new Jane study, which sounds pretty credible to me, says 50 to 60% of them are jihadists. So that means they're winning the war with the rebels. And if the Sunnis do win, that means that Israel has got a radical government, almost like Iran, except they're Sunni on their border. So it'd be a country run by Al-Qaeda, essentially. Jordan, Lebanon, overwhelmed by the refugees, 2,200 a day. If you can imagine trying to process 2,200 people in every day, it's overwhelmed Jordan. Jordan is a poor country. They don't have any oil. All they have are tourists, and with all the refugees that have come into Amman and other places to get work, they've become a little bit more dangerous. Pickpocketing, begging in Amman is very, very common now, and it just wasn't even 6 or 7 months ago. So the chance of this thing turning out well are pretty small. Pakistan, this one should be on everybody's radar, but I don't think it is. The civilian government's a mess over there. Corruption is rampant because of the Haqqani network, which is a Sunni radical network that operates in the central and western part of the country. And they're a very powerful mafia-like family group that sort of runs things there. Foreign investment has declined rapidly by orders of magnitude in the last even just 18 months. And the respect for the military had a great deal of respect in Pakistan because they were disciplined and they were an army of the people, much like Egypt's army. And after Odyssey Dawn, which was when we went in and killed Osama bin Laden, the respect for the military has gone down drastically. And even though we're killing a lot of bad guys up in Waziristan, which is right up here along the border, with drone strikes, this has also angered the Pakistani people because they're a proud people, and the fact that somebody could come into their country and kill somebody without them knowing about it is making them mad, and I guess it would us too. A number of high-profile attacks. You know about the young 14-year-old girl that was shot in the head, that pull people off of buses, execute them, cut off their heads, do all sorts of terrible, terrible things to people, and that's all run by Haqqani network or other jihadists. The probability of conflict with India is increasing significantly. I noticed that the Indians claim to have killed 12 Pakistanis who were infiltrating across the border just over the weekend. And so that's all happening up in this area, right in here, up next to that part of India that has been disputed for several years, and since they were formed in 1947. They haul their nuke weapons around, and they've got several of them, over 100. They haul them around the back of pickup trucks. If any of you have been around nuclear weapons, you know that when we move a nuclear weapon, we have a convoy with the security police and armored vehicles and blah, 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 blah. It's just incredible the work we go through. They throw them in the back of a pickup truck and take off and haul them to another base, just that simple. And if you're a jihadist and you figure that out, it's not long before you're going to put an RPG in that pickup and pick up the nuclear weapon. So this is really a difficult thing. So what are the implications? We're not done in the Mideast, despite the end of our stay in Iraq and the 2014 withdrawal from Afghanistan. The Arab Spring just wasn't It was really the Arab Winter or the Arab disaster or whatever you want to call it. Iran's possession of nuclear weapons, they're going after nuclear weapons. The question is, will they stop before they get the components put together, or will they stop because they can't fit it to a rocket, or will they just build them and set one off? Nobody knows exactly what they're going to do. The potential for conflict to become regional is significantly higher than it ever has been, because the Sunnis, headed mostly by Saudi Arabia, Qatar, Kuwait, and the UAE, are arming the rebels, the Sunni rebels in Syria. And the government there, the al-Assad government, is being financed by Iran. Iran is a Shiite country, and Syria, the al-Assad family and the ruling party in Syria, those guys are not Shiite, they're Alawite, but it's sort of, they're sort of like Protestants. So if you thought of the guys in the south as Catholics and the guys in the north as all Protestants, that would be a good way to think about it. So even though the Alawites are not strictly Shiite, they're Protestants, if you would. So if you look at the way this is going right now, Shiite government here, majority of Shiites, but the Sunnis are at war with them. Shiite government here, Shiite government, although there is no government, there hasn't been a government in Lebanon for about 12 months. And isn't that amazing? You know, we think of this default and all that stuff. They haven't had a government for 12 months, nothing. The Hezbollah, the Shiites withdrew, and so the government collapsed. But if you think of this, all the way across the north, Shiite, 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 and then across the south, Sunni. This could become a radical Sunni country. This one already is. We just pulled a Al-Qaeda number 3 guy out of there over the weekend. You heard about that. Algeria's pretty quiet. Morocco's incredibly stable because they have a remarkable man in leadership, the king over there, educated in England, put in place by the Brits, just a remarkable guy. But this is a sort of a Sunni crescent, and up here you have a Shiite crescent. These guys have been at war with one another for a long time. If they get consolidated, I don't know what's going to happen. There's just a possibility of war. Israel versus Iran, that's a huge possibility. And will the Syrian conflict expand? There was a lot of people betting just about 6 weeks ago that it was going to expand into Lebanon. If you recall, a lot of people were killed in Tripoli and Hebron, and there was a huge bomb set off right in downtown Beirut. Our district president from over there wrote a note and said, "Don't send anybody else over here. It looks like we're all going to go underground. I'm going to France." But it didn't happen by the grace of God, and I don't know when it will happen, but there's a good chance that it might. Now, is all that bad? No, it's not all bad. The Lord's hand is moving over this area. And as was explained so readily here just a little while ago, it all began over there and it'll all end over there. So the Lord has got his eye on this place, and the church has 41 units over there, 1 stake, 4 districts and military branches and groups in Iraq and Afghanistan. The group in Iraq is really not a military group because we don't have any military people there anymore, but it's run by some expats who are there. We got 3,300 members. We have humanitarian couples in Morocco, 3 in Jordan, and 1 in Lebanon. And they're doing, and let me just go back one and point out this building. This is a brand new stake center. It's built in Abu Dhabi on land given to us by the government. And so if you ever get to Abu Dhabi, it is a remarkable building. And it was done probably by one of the finest contractors that I've ever seen. I've inspected a lot of buildings, and that one is really done remarkably well. The dots on the map are units, so you have an idea where we're at. The church organization, it's managed by the Middle East Africa North Desk, which has Elder Bruce Porter in charge, and I'm his assistant. I've told you about the stake and district. They report direct. They don't report to an area presidency because we don't have one. They report direct to the Middle East Desk. Units, you can see where the units are. I won't read all those to you. You probably are familiar with where they are. This number right here, though, 56 groups, that's in flux. In fact, the district report, which I got on Friday and I didn't incorporate into this briefing, said that number is a little bit different than 56, and that's because of the withdrawal. A lot of people are consolidating, and so we're getting rid of groups as we need to. LDS Charities have been active in the area since 1990. So for 23 years we've been over there, and we've been doing a remarkable number of things. 13 countries, which is almost all of them in the Mideast. All of those kind of things. We specialize in about 6 different things in LDS Charity because we're not a huge organization. But the great thing about LDS Charities is if you put $1 in the humanitarian fund line on your donation slip, every penny of that will go to humanitarian work. And the reason is there are only 20 people that work in the humanitarian office here, and most of them are volunteers. So there's only about 5 people that are paid, and they're paid out of the operational budget of the church, not out of humanitarian funds. So every dollar goes to humanitarian work. It's the most efficient charity in the world. Over there, a lot of interfaith harmony. This is Patriarch Twall. He's the Catholic patriarch, and they don't have a cardinal, but they have a patriarch, which is kind of a little bit, maybe one notch below a cardinal, but when they go to the Vatican, they're all kind of the same. And I was over there with him to open up an American university that the Catholics built, and we have helped them get accredited. In other words, without our help, without a couple of guys from BYU who went over there and who have spent 4 years now with them, they would not be an accredited college. And so they're just very happy with us, and we have a remarkably good working relationship with the Catholics. We do a lot of other joint projects. The picture you have right down there on the bottom, and I guess the lights are a little bright, but that's a group of members in Beirut putting together humanitarian baskets for refugees who are coming over from Syria. And we do everything we do over there in partnership with other large charities like Caritas, which is a Catholic, or Our Lady of Grace, and then government charities set up by the King of Jordan and other government leaders in the Mideast. Then this is another assembly line here putting together, these are kits, 3,500 kits we put together in 2 days in the UAE and shipped to a camp, a newly established camp in Jordan. The refugee relief thing is just incredible. You can see the numbers here. Jordan, almost 500,000 now. Lebanon, they didn't establish any camps in Lebanon, and the reason is they did it the last time when the Palestinians came, and they've never gotten rid of them. So they just said, we're not going to establish a camp, you're not going to get a home, so they've essentially integrated into the society. And so if you can imagine, Lebanon is a small country. Their population has changed by 25%. Can you imagine what would happen in the United States if our population changed by 25%? Some of them have even gone to Iraq, so things are really bad in Syria. This is a sample of one of the things we just did. We have one couple in Morocco, and they've only been there 8 months. And this course that we have for neonatal resuscitation, and what that is, in case you don't know, is some babies are born, they're not breathing. If you have a baby in a hospital here in the United States and it's not breathing, you probably don't even know it, because they hand it to a nurse, she resuscitates the baby within what they call that golden minute, and nothing ever happens. That's the end of it. They're just fine. But if you're born in a birthing center, or a midwife does it in their home in a mud hut in the middle of the north edge of Morocco, and the baby's not breathing, they die. So about 20% of the babies die. Or if they're saved, they're handicapped. They're mentally handicapped because you don't get them in that first minute. So we have a course, the only course in the world that's approved by the American Pediatrics Association, and we hand out the equipment. So we go in and train everyone from midwives up to neonatal specialists. And just a couple of weeks ago, we did 4 courses, trained almost 200 physicians, nurses, and midwives from 119 different organizations. And that was 2 of the courses up in the north of the country and 2 of the courses in the south. So the government was just remarkably pleased. They all got the equipment, and we send them away with a charge that now they will go train 8 others. So this will spread across the country and have a big effect. Now I put this in at the end, so I save time for 5 minutes worth of questions. Thus saith the Lord God, when I shall have gathered the house of Israel from the people among whom they are scattered, and shall be sanctified in them in the sight of the heathen, then shall they dwell in their land that I have given to my servant Jacob. This is the part that is interesting to me. And they shall dwell safely therein, and shall build houses and plant vineyards. Yea, they shall dwell with confidence. When I have executed judgments upon all those that despise them around about them, and they shall know that I am the Lord their God. Now that's probably millennial in nature, or at least close to the millennial. But the point is that someday the Jews are going to live in peace and confidence. And right now, I can tell you that they're not living in peace and confidence. They're living in deep concern because of what's happening around them. They're increasingly isolated, and I just think it's important to keep our perspective in this and not think, oh goodness, the sky is falling, the sky is falling. No, it isn't. It's just that the Lord's hastening His work, and we're fortunate enough to be living in a time when it's happening. Now that, I'd be glad to...